This is Fresh Air. I'm Terry Gross. On this edition, we hear from comic, writer, actor, and director Albert Brooks. He's starring in the new movie, My First Mister. Our film critic John Powers has called Brooks the funniest man in America and our leading satirist of middle-class self-indulgence. Brooks also wrote, directed, and starred in the films The Muse, Mother, Real Life, Modern Romance, Lost in America, and Defending Your Life. He also appeared in the film Taxi Driver as a campaign worker and co-starred in broadcast news as an insecure journalist. He started his career as a stand-up comic. One of his classic comedy routines is about holding auditions to find an alternative to the national anthem, a song many people have criticized over the years for being too difficult to sing. Our linguist Jeff Nunberg talked about American anthems yesterday. Here's Brooks's take from his first comedy record.
Dan Allen, Denver, Colorado. "3,000 miles from coast to coast, every citizen has reason to boast." Thank you. Thank you. Can the lights be changed at all? All right, it's not important. Before I sing my song, I should tell you a bit about myself. My name is Mr. Robert Bob Harmon, and I currently live and work in the very exciting city of Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm an entertainer. And you know, Vegas is a great place, an exciting place, but originally I'm from a much quieter place. A place up north, out west, a place I call Portland. What a great place it is. In one 30-square-mile radius, there's more to do than almost anywhere in the world. There's hunting and fishing and boating and camping. Get on with it! I am. It's how I get into it in the actor. It's got beautiful waterfalls and gorgeous trees, but you know, it's part of a bigger place. It's part of a country. Can you guess which country it is? No, it's not Denmark or Poland or Sweden or Rome. Get on with it! It's a lovely place I call home. I'm proud to say I've got a country. Got a country. I spell it A-M-E-R-I-C-A. Get off the stage! Thank you. Thank you.
Albert Brooks from his first comedy album, Comedy -1. I spoke with Brooks in 1996 after the release of his film Mother. In some of your early work as a comic, back when you were doing stand-up, and in some of your really early movie work, you made fun of a certain showbiz kind of comedy.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, you must have grown up with that. Your father was a comic.
Yeah. Well, my father died when I was 11, but I still, remember that it was okay to, be funny, and I watched somebody do it for a living, even though he pretty much was out of it by the time I was born. I used to listen. He was a radio comedian. He went under the name of Parkarkas, and he was a Greek dialect comedian, and that's the character he played. And even though he was off the air when I was born, we used to have these huge, those big 16-inch records of all the radio shows, and I would listen to it, and I sort of was able to see into show business early, Somehow I got it, that it might not be exactly what you think it is.
How did your father, who I assume was Jewish, his name was Einstein, how did he get to play a Greek dialect comic?
Well, he played, during the 40s when he was on the air. I think being an immigrant coming to America was a very popular thing, and I don't know how exactly or where. I know he was born in Boston, and he worked in the advertising business, and I think he just did this character for fun. And then Eddie Cantor heard him once at a dinner, and actually I think thought he was really Greek, and said, talked to him slowly like he wouldn't understand him, "Would you like to come to New York and be on my show?" And my father said, "You can talk faster. I'm born in America." And I don't know why he came up with that, but I think the idea of the poor immigrant who comes to America was something that, obviously he liked.
When you started doing comedy, your comedy was it came out of who you were as a real person,
Yeah.
and a lot of your monologues were pretty autobiographical.
Right. I never told jokes. I don't think I've ever told a joke in my life.
Right.
I
So
never.
so this more autobiographical approach was really different from where your father was coming from, where he didn't even play
Absolutely.
his own ethnic group, let alone talk about his life.
Absolutely. And that's exactly right. Yeah.
Did you feel like you had any models for what you wanted to do, a more autobiographical approach?
No, I'll tell you, when I was very young, I remember watching Jack Benny and thinking that this man figured it all out. Jack Benny really never told jokes. I mean, look what he did. He would stare and people would laugh, and his persona was so clear. It was so, the audience understood it so well that he really, he was amazing. He was the world's great minimalist.
Is that what you were trying for, to do very little and have it be very effective?
Or just sort of those old guys used to play themselves. This is not a new thing. This is one of the original things that radio and television did. George Burns and Jack Benny and Fred Allen. It was their lives we were laughing at. So I think it was, it just showed you that you didn't have to stand up there and say, my wife is fat. There were other things to do. But actually, the kind of comedy I did, I really didn't see before I did it. So I didn't have a role model in that somebody was making fun of I sort of was making fun of the institutions that were still going on. When I first started, the first thing I ever did was a ventriloquist act called Danny and Dave, which was basically the world's worst ventriloquist. He was introduced as, a real ventriloquist, and his mouth moved more than the dummy, and the dummy used to drink water while he would sing, and, I would do all of those ventriloquist tricks where I would try to smoke a cigarette, and, I just threw the dummy on the floor to get him out of my hand so I could smoke. And, many people laughed, and a couple of people in the very beginning said, that's the worst ventriloquist I've ever seen. So, and this happened in my first movie. When I did Real Life, I played a character called Albert Brooks. And, here was a man named Albert Brooks who set up this whole thing as a realistic experiment of filming a family and trying to make it a sociological experiment. And I would say half the reviews I got in America were real. I still remember, I remember, I'm not sure if it was Rex Reed or somebody who said, why in God's name would a studio give this man money to do such an important experiment? And, I was stunned. I always thought everybody figured everything out, but they didn't. And so it just took years to sort of, maybe make a few people realize that this was thought of and it wasn't just a bad act.
So you went from one scene to another. You went from the TV variety shows, which had an older audience, and then you went to opening for rock acts like
That's right.
like Neil Diamond and Richie Havens. So it's one extreme to another.
Exactly. I did. I sort of had a whole reverse thing because, like everybody else, does clubs and then gets on television. I did about 5 years of television before I ever performed in front of a live concert audience. I actually remember the first time I ever performed was in Mississippi with Neil Diamond, and I had just done in the previous year, when Merv Griffin was on CBS, I had done like 15 of his shows. And I remember trying to put together bits of a Merv Griffin show to do as a half hour in front of a live audience. I didn't even have the transitions in my mind yet of talking to a group of people because I was so used to these bits. And it was very, sometimes it was fun, but opening for rock acts in the early 70s, I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Why not?
Well, it was way before comedy was in or even, popular in any regard. Comedy sort of didn't start to get this popularity until, I guess, were the 80s. And let's face it, these people took a lot of drugs and went to see, they wanted to hear the loudest music they could hear. And I think there's an old Chinese adage that says 16 sleeping pills does not make for a good comedy audience. They took a lot of these downers and would sit there and they were waiting for, Sly and the Family Stone, and the disc jockey had to come out and tell him I was there.
Right, and you were going to come on and talk about things that made you
neurotic
and insecure.
Right, yeah, it doesn't matter. It's called talk about. It's not.
Right,
it's not the human voice they were waiting to hear. They wanted to hear these amplifiers turned up to 1 billion decibels. They wanted to be hurt. So I had some very rough experiences trying to get people to listen. I remember once I did open for Sly, and it was in Tacoma, Washington, and the show was at 8:00, and my phone rang at 7:30 in the hotel, and actually a motel, a little teeny room there, and it was Sly, Sly and the Family Stone. It was his manager, and at that time it wasn't a secret. Sly was, experimenting with Columbia's most famous product, and I don't mean the studio. And so the guy said to me, he said, "Let me ask you something, Albert. How long do you do?" I said, "Well, normally a half hour, but I'm a little worried about this audience, maybe 20 minutes. He said, and now we're in Tacoma. He said, "What's the longest you can do?" I said, "Well, I don't know. Why?" "Well, Sly called, and he's in Cincinnati." He had missed the plane. I said, "What? He's in Cincinnati?" I said, "Well, what are you talking about? I got to do 3.5 hours?" "Well, actually, it would be longer because he can't get a plane until 7. I said, "Look, you got the wrong guy here. I don't know if I should even go on." So I actually did go on, and I remember somebody threw a beer can and cut my leg, and I got angry at the audience. I started to yell at them and said, "He's not even here, and I'm going to go on Johnny Carson and tell them that you're horrible," and as if they would all stop and go, "Ooh." Anyway, I just got out of town quickly. I ran off the stage. It was not fun.
You see, you could have said you had 2 hours left and then taken questions from the audience for the next 2 hours.
Questions, right, like, how do you want to be killed, fire or knife? That would have been the question. No, it was bad. And I'll tell you what I did do. I still remember. I went back because all their equipment was there, and I started to just play a bass note like the beginning of a Supreme song. Bum, 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 bum. And they all quieted down, and I couldn't play. And so, I was just quiet. They just were ready. And I tried to say very patiently, "He's not even here." But, they didn't care. They weren't in the mood to be polite. And as I say, I think drugs and comedy don't go well.
Yeah. My guest is comic, writer, actor, and director Albert Brooks. He's starring in the new film My First Mister. Let's get back to the interview I recorded with him in 1996 after the release of his film Mother, which he wrote, directed, and starred in. He played a middle-aged man in the early stages of a divorce. He knows he's screwed up, and he blames his insecurities on his hypercritical mother, played by Debbie Reynolds. In an attempt to understand what went wrong in his relationship with his mother, he moves back in with her. As soon as he walks in the door, he knows he's in trouble.
Want something to eat?
No.
I made some salad, and I have some meatloaf.
I don't eat meat.
Oh, that's right. This Jeff who loves it.
I'll have some salad.
Well, don't have salad just for my sake.
No, I'll have it.
Are you sure you want salad?
Yes, I want salad.
Not just for my sake.
Mother, don't get into this food stuff now, please. Just give me a little salad.
Oh, I know what I could do. I could scrape the top off the meatloaf.
What would that do?
Well, it wouldn't be as much meat then.
But it's still meat. What difference does it make how much you have?
You really don't like meat, huh?
No, Mother, I don't like eating cows.
Oh, honey, everything comes from a cow. Everything.
The classic Jewish mother in a lot of American fiction and movies is the critical, domineering, overprotective mother. The mother in your movie is critical, but she doesn't care quite enough about the son. So she's
Yes.
she's not domineering and overprotective. The son
nor-
almost wishes that she was.
Right. Nor do I think this is a Jewish mother, but because the Jewish mother is such a cliche of exactly what you say, and I don't. I wasn't out to make it a particular religion. I think that there are two kinds of mothers on the planet, no matter what religion or who they are, and that's either the mothers that think everything their children do are perfect, or the other kind. And this is about the other kind. They can be Catholics, Protestants, Jews, or atheists. It's just the idea that they're critical. However, the real mothers, the mothers that I have met, once the children leave, they don't want them back. Who would want them back? Did you ever see a bird when the other birds leave the nest? They tear down the nest and find a tree and don't tell the other birds where that tree is. So it's, the idea that they want children back is it's silly to me. And that's the cliche part. Being critical isn't.
So is your mother really critical?
Well, she's, loving, but it's not, and I wouldn't even call it critical. My mother has always sort of been puzzled why I'm who I am. And I think one of the reasons is that if my mother and I, if there was one thing we didn't share, it probably was, she didn't get my sense of humor. Sense of humor is a very personal thing. Mm-hmm. And you can love a child and still have no idea why other people are laughing at them. So I think that my mother was always sort of, I know I must have done 50 Tonight shows when, Carson was hosting, and the audience would laugh their head off, and my mother and I would always have the same conversation after every show, which was basically, I would say, "Did you see it?" And she would say, "Oh, honey, it was wonderful. What did Johnny think?" And I would say, "Well, he liked it, but did you like it?" "No, of course, honey, but Johnny liked it." So that was going to be my autobiography title, "What Did Johnny Think?"
Now there's some very funny things about food. Your character comes back to the mother's house and she saves a lot of food in the freezer where it's
Yes.
guaranteed to taste really bad after a while.
Yes.
And she buys all those horrible store brands. In the movie, it's Sweet Tooth
Yes.
Sherbet.
Yes, I made that up. But
Oh, is it
obviously
perfect though?
Yes.
So was this a problem at your home too? That your mother would buy all the cheap brands?
That part is, my mother we could afford anything, but she just didn't believe that there was, like Debbie says in the movie, "Honey, there's no difference. The man in the store told me it's just the label." I think that my mother probably has said that to me. I really think that somewhere in the back of her mind, she felt that all food came from the same vat in Chicago, and they just, put on a different label somewhere.
Did you ever Yeah, go ahead.
I'm saying, we had brands of food they looked like the real thing. Like the cookies had, they were black with white in the middle, but it was like, Soreos. It was one letter off. And, there's a thing that I love in this movie, this sherbet that's been in the freezer for about 16 years and you can't even see it anymore. And I say to, my mother in the movie, I say, "Look at this crap that sits on the top," and she has named it. She says, "Oh no, honey, you look under the protective ice."
Yeah, I love the protective ice. Yeah.
I said, "You've named this stuff? I can't believe it." But my mother still, to this day, my mother has this Neapolitan ice cream. There aren't three colors anymore. It's just one color it's blended into. I don't know what that color is even, but the chocolate and vanilla and strawberry have long ago stopped being divided. They just are like a light yellow. My mother does the funniest thing about my movies. Well, first of all, I know what you're going to ask. What did she think?
Oh, did she get the jokes?
Oh, yeah. The first thing she said is, "Honey, I think one or two things are from us." I said, "One or two things?" That's what it's an hour and 40 minutes. And my mother praised me. She liked this the best. And she praises me by using my other movies. She says, "I think this is going to be the most popular because in this one you don't have to die or drop out." Or I said, "I know, I get it. I understand what you're saying." But something? She really did like this. I can tell. I know my mother, and I think that she loved it.
Albert Brooks recorded in 1996. He's starring in the new film My First Mister.